立法會主席。
The President. Questions. Question 1, Ms. Starry Lee. President, it has been reported that since the reform of the secondary school curriculum in 2001, quite a number of secondary schools have cancelled teaching Chinese history as an independent subject in their junior secondary curriculum, resulting in a continuous decline in the number of senior secondary students taking the subjects in recent years. This year, only some 7,400 candidates took the exam on the subject of Chinese history of the Hong Kong DSE exam, representing a sharp drop of over 1,000 candidates from that of last year. In this connection, will government inform this council A of the number of secondary schools currently teaching Chinese history as an independent subject in both their junior and senior secondary curriculum, a number of those who have a combined subject of Chinese history and world history in their junior secondary curriculum, and a number of those which only teach Chinese history using a thematic approach under the subject of integrated humanities in their junior secondary curriculum, and the respective percentages of such numbers in the total number of secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum. B, of the respective numbers and percentages of S4 to 6 students taking the subject of Chinese history each year since the implementation of the new senior secondary curriculum. And C, as some academics have pointed out that knowledge in the history of one's nation is the foundation for the sense of national identity, whether the Education Bureau will consider afresh requiring all secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum to teach Chinese history as an independent and compulsory subject at a junior secondary level. If so, when it will be implemented, if not, of the reasons for that. Secretary for Education. President, the Education Bureau has requested all secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum to teach Chinese history at a junior secondary level. In other words, Chinese history is clearly compulsory in junior secondary. Let me emphasize, Chinese history is clearly compulsory in junior secondary. Regarding senior secondary, Chinese history will continue to be an elective subject as in the past. Under the old academic structure, candidates usually took 4 to 5 subjects in addition to Chinese, English and Maths at the HKCEE, but now under the NSS academic structure, students only take 2 to 3 subjects in addition to the core subjects. Therefore, there are fewer students in most elective subjects, and among them Chinese history. It is our view that the above situation is irrelevant to whether Chinese history is an independent subject at the junior secondary level. Teaching Chinese history as an independent subject means dissociating Chinese history from world history and from the humanities subjects, and to teach China's 5,000 years of history by individual dynasties with the focus placed on political history with its order and chaos and changes in regime from the 1911 revolution to the year 2000. Such Chinese history curriculum approach is considered to be a more traditional one in Hong Kong, but this is not the only way to teach Chinese history. Some academics advocate an integrated subject linking the curricula of Chinese history and world history. This will enable students to have an idea of China's position in the context of world development in different eras and allow more comprehensive examination of the similarities and differences as well as their experience of interaction between China and beyond in terms of their development. Other academics argue that Chinese history can be organized along certain themes designed in such a way that students will be able to have a grasp of Chinese social, cultural, and technological developments in addition to order and chaos of dynastic rule. Dozens of schools in Hong Kong have put in practice different curriculum modes in the teaching of Chinese history. Some of these teachers involved won the CE's Award for Teaching Excellence. The EDB considers that such efforts should be duly recognized and encouraged. Optimizing the learning of Chinese history and making it more interesting is the most effective strategy to increase the number of senior students taking the subject as an elective. The Bureau will continue to refine the Chinese history curriculum and optimize the relevant learning and teaching strategies while providing appropriate support for teachers. As regards the 3-part question, our reply is as follows. A. Out of the 448 secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum at the junior secondary level, 393 are offering Chinese history as an independent subject, representing 87.7% of the total number. And among these 393 schools, 343 offer Chinese history as an independent subject in S1 to S3. 25 of them offer Chinese history in 2 junior secondary years, and another 25 offer the subject for S3 only. In other words, only 55 schools do not offer Chinese history as an independent subject at the junior secondary level, representing 12.12% of the total number. And out of these, 23 schools teach Chinese history and world history as an integrated subject, while another 32 schools adopt a thematic approach and teach Chinese history under the subject of IH. At the senior secondary level, there are 450 schools offering mainstream curriculum in the current school year. The numbers and percentages of schools offering Chinese history at S4, S5, and S6 levels are 402, 89.5%, 403, 89.6%, and 413, 91.8% respectively. B. The respective numbers and percentages of S4 to S6 students taking Chinese history each year since the implementation of the NSS curriculum are found in the reply. C. The Bureau considers that to cultivate a sense of national identity in students, it is important for them to have a command of knowledge in the history of our nation. Before the handover, Chinese history was merely an elective subject in grammar and technical schools. The subject was not an elective in pre-vocational schools at all. But after the handover, the Bureau has attached greater importance to teaching Chinese history and stipulates that all secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum teach Chinese history and culture at the junior secondary level. Further, regardless of their mode of teaching, schools are required to assign no fewer than 2 periods or so per week for the teaching of the subject. The Bureau does not share the view that cultivating a sense of national identity in students can only be achieved through the independent subject approach, that is, teaching Chinese history based on the chronological order of dynasties. Though this curriculum model has been around for years in Hong Kong and is widely in use among schools, the same cannot be found elsewhere in the world. Even in the mainland Taiwan and the Macau SAR, they only have history as one single subject, which is a combination of Chinese history and world history. Given the massive body of knowledge in Chinese history, there are diverse views as to how the subject content can be organized in such a way that enables every student to grasp the essentials, requiring all secondary schools offering mainstream curriculum to adopt only the independent subject approach when teaching Chinese history to junior students means negating the attempts and achievements of schools that have endeavored to optimize the Chinese history curriculum. This does not bode well for Chinese history education with regard to its long-term development. Thank you. Ms. Starry Lee. President, I think it's essential that Chinese students study Chinese history. In fact, at the primary level and at the junior secondary level, I think it is important and necessary for students to study Chinese history. Now, according to the Secretary's reply, only 55 schools do not offer Chinese history as an independent subject at the junior secondary level, representing 12.12% of the total number. So it means that only a small percentage doesn't offer the subject as an independent subject at the junior secondary level. But my worry is that this will become a trend. More and more schools will decide not to offer Chinese history as an independent subject at the junior secondary level. Now, I think having offering Chinese history as an independent subject means at least 2 lessons a week or 1.5 hours per week at least. In other words, at least 66 hours a year at least. But then in these 55 schools, Chinese history only constitutes part of the curriculum of a subject, and that would mean only about a dozen hours a year on Chinese history. Am I right? Can you confirm whether I'm right or wrong? Does it mean that if schools do not offer Chinese history as an independent subject, then that would mean the students will only be studying Chinese history for a small number of hours every year? Secretary. President, we haven't seen a trend where fewer and fewer secondary schools are offering Chinese history as an independent subject at the junior secondary level. In fact, the Bureau earlier on commissioned CU History Department to study integrating world history and Chinese history and the curriculum adopting a thematic approach. And I understand that the team is now putting together some teaching kits for the reference of primary and secondary schools. And the objective is to make Chinese history a more interesting subject to teach and learn. And then some have suggested that there should be school-based assessment for Chinese history. In fact, we do allow students to share their personal experience. For example, they pay visits to museums and then they write reports, and some of them go on site visits to Guangzhou, Weizhou, and here we're talking about 30 hours of learning. So in fact, it's just to adopt a more comprehensive approach towards the subject. Is it that your question has not been answered? President, so for the 55 schools, as Chinese history is not offered as an independent subject at the junior secondary level, does it mean that students will be studying Chinese history for a small number of hours per year only? Thank you, President. Irrespective of the mode of teaching, the subject, that schools still need to adhere to the guidelines issued by the Bureau, and that is 2 lessons or sessions per week. Ms. Priscilla Leung. No, LS was launched at the expense of Chinese history. In fact, many teachers have lamented over this situation. In fact, I object to scrapping the subject of Chinese history. I don't think it's really appropriate to put all the eggs in the basket of LS. Now, for example, LS, everybody is so concerned about this subject. It's a compulsory subject, and also people are concerned about the workload of LS teachers. So will you consider making both Chinese history and LS compulsory subjects, so that with regard to the quality of teaching, workload of teachers, I think there should be these should be evened out, so that you'll be better able to meet the aspirations of teachers, parents, and students in Hong Kong. Secretary. President, now in fact we have 4 core subjects for the new senior secondary academic structure, and Chinese history is in fact also a very popular subject. If we look at AL and also DSE, we see that Chinese history is the 8th most popular elective, and in fact the trend has not changed, so this is important. I just want to say that the number has dropped because of certain factors, and that's why we really need to try to bring about improvements to the teaching and the learning of Chinese history. And concerning the 4th 5-year IT plan, teachers do suggest that IT should be more used more extensively to enhance the effectiveness of teaching and learning. So we can see that in fact Chinese history still ranks 8th among the electives for DSE. So it is not true to say that Chinese history has become less popular. Is it that your question has not been answered? So will the Secretary consider making both Chinese history and LS core subjects or compulsory subjects? Secretary. Now concerning the 4 core subjects, now in fact we are only in the 2nd year of the DSE exam and the new senior secondary academic structure, and so we still need time to monitor the effectiveness of the NSS reforms and the NSS curriculum. So for the medium term and the long term, we'll continue to monitor the development of this subject. Ms. Elizabeth QUAT. Thank you. President. Some time ago, the media asked the CE why Chinese history was not made a compulsory subject at the senior secondary level. He was asked whether that would go against his policy and his platform. But is it that the CE doesn't want to change the situation because of some views in society? According to the CE, if Chinese history is made a compulsory subject and the students are not interested and they are not attentive in class and they do not study the subject, or they do not do any revision, then it would be futile to make it a compulsory subject. So what are the conditions that the CE considers necessary to make Chinese history a compulsory subject or a core subject? Secretary. Now, after the handover for schools adopting the mainstream curriculum, Chinese history is a compulsory subject at the junior secondary level. Previously, there was no Chinese history subject in pre-vocational schools, but now this is a compulsory subject. So let me emphasize that at the junior secondary level, Chinese history is clearly compulsory. It's clearly a compulsory subject. Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you. President, in my days, students studied Chinese history from before the Stone Age to about 1939, and students learned a lot about the nation's or the country's culture and political development. So why is it that the Bureau is totally against this idea? Why is it that the Bureau is telling us that in fact the approach we adopted in Hong Kong can't be found in the mainland Taiwan and Macau as they are? In the U.S., they stress the people's national identity, and so from junior secondary to senior secondary, because the history of the U.S. was short, students studied the U.S. history a few times, and then when students proceed to university, they start comparing the history of their nation with the history of other countries. Secretary, you said that in Chinese history, we have a massive body of knowledge. So why is it that you think it's sufficient to just select certain topics in Chinese history and compare those with the development of world history? Are you of the view that Hong Kong students are smart enough to master the whole of Chinese history, or is it that teachers will find it difficult to teach in such a manner? Secretary. I think from before the Stone Age, Chinese history is important. We're talking about the different dynasties, and in fact 87.7% of the total number of schools offering the mainstream curriculum do go along this route. But then some CU professors have done some research. They are of the view that in fact there can be a different approach to teach Chinese history, and that's why about 12% of the schools are adopting a different approach. And in fact we are closely monitoring the response of students to this approach. Now in fact we fully accept the mainstream approach to teach Chinese history, but then it is just that there are 55 schools trying out a new model, trying to make the teaching and learning of the subject more interesting. Is it that your question has not been answered? I want to know why the Bureau is so against the idea of teaching Chinese history from beginning to end based on a chronological order of dynasties. Now, Secretary, President, in fact, we have no objection to such an approach. In fact, we support such an approach. But then teachers need to take into account the different learning abilities of students, the different interests in deciding how to teach the subject. Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, President, now the Education Bureau has decided that Chinese history should no longer be a compulsory subject. So people get the impression that Education Bureau officials, in fact, have forgotten about their own history. Why is it that the secretary didn't dare to read para B of the reply to us? Do you know that for S4, S5, S6 and students, very few of them choose Chinese history as one of the electives? Miss Elizabeth QUAT asked you, Secretary, under what circumstances and conditions the government would make Chinese history a compulsory subject or a core subject again, and you kept talking about junior secondary. So can I ask you this question again? I'm not talking about junior secondary. Please give us relevant replies. When will you make Chinese history a core subject at the senior secondary level? Secretary, President, I thank the member for his question. It gives me an opportunity to clarify the situation. In fact, Chinese history, for junior secondary, there hasn't been any change. Let me emphasize, for S1 to S3, Chinese history is a compulsory subject. S4 to S6, and also for S7 previously, Chinese history is an elective. So members, we haven't changed our position. Chinese history has remained an elective for S4 to S6 or S4 to S7. But then previously for the HKCEE, students took 3 to 4 electives, but then for the DSE, students only take 2 to 3 electives. And that is why at S4, about 16% of the students choose Chinese history as an elective. At S6, it may be 11 to 12%. So we hope that we can try to stimulate interest in the subject. We want to have more interactive learning and teaching. And as I've said just now, we want to make more use of IT. So that students will be able to learn the subject with more interest. Mr. Ip Kin Yoon, President, the Secretary said a few times that Chinese history was a compulsory subject at a junior secondary level. I don't think this is entirely true. I think I can only say that Chinese history must be studied, but many schools do not have an independent subject called Chinese history. But I want to say that even if you make Chinese history as an independent subject, it doesn't mean that you have to follow the chronological order of dynasties in teaching Chinese history. President, I think members all want to point out the importance of teaching students Chinese history. According to the Secretary, Chinese history ranks 8th on the popularity table. But then in the last HKCEE, Chinese history ranked 6th on the popularity table. In that year, 23,740 students took Chinese history as an elective, but in the second DSE exam, the number dropped to 7,705. Please ask your question. What I want to say is that, in fact, the number of students studying and choosing Chinese history as an elective has dropped. So, is it that students now have less interest in the subject, or is it that fewer schools are offering the subject? I think we have to find out the reason, or else it's quite difficult for us to find a solution to the problem. Secretary, President, yes, I have observed a reduction in the number of students taking Chinese history as an elective. Just now, Mr. Ip said that only about 7,400 students took Chinese history as a DSE elective. But in 2012, about 4,000 students took this subject at A level. So I want to say that this student number has dropped. And I think this may be attributed to the drop in the overall number of students. So I want to say that, first, Chinese history is important. Second, we respect students' choices. So we need to enhance the teaching of Chinese history. We have to make the subject more interesting so that students will be interested in the subject and will wish to take the subject as an elective. Mr. Yip, you may not be happy with the reply, but then we've exceeded the time limit. We've used over 25 minutes on this question, and there are many members which are queuing up to ask questions. We have to proceed.
Question to the Honorable Vincent FANG. President, it is learned that the number of mainland visitors to Hong Kong under the individual visit scheme has been on the rise over the past decade, and the places where they go shopping concentrate in shopping malls, shops, and traditional shopping areas along the railway lines. According to the statistics of the Census and Statistics Department, the gross proceeds of the retail industry had grown by 1.3% between 2002 and 2011, but the retail floor area had increased only by 30% during the same period. As the demand far exceeds the supply, rents of shops in traditional tourist shopping areas have surged continuously and caused the rise in commodity prices, thereby giving rise to discontent among members of the public towards mainland visitors. On the other hand, the Chief Executive said when he took office that he would take measures to increase retail floor area and ancillary facilities. However, relevant measures have not yet been taken so far, and as a result, the development of the retail industry still faces serious constraints. In this connection, would the government inform this Council A, given that although the Secretary for Development told this Council on the 6th of February this year that more retail floor area will be provided in Kowloon East, Kai Tak development area as well as in the new development areas in NT, Northeast and Hong Kong under planning, he did not reveal the number of large shopping malls to be developed in such development areas, nor the estimated retail floor area to be provided and the completion time. Whether the government has plans to increase retail floor area and ancillary facilities in the short term, build large shopping malls at places near the boundary or along the railway lines and increase the retail floor area in traditional shopping areas, for example, by building an underground shopping center in Causeway Bay, etc., so as to meet the pressing demand for shopping facilities arising from the increase in the number of visitors at present and to ease the conflicts between local consumers and mainland visitors, and if it has, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. B, whether in the medium to long term, the government has any plan to increase the proportion of retail floor area for the sites scheduled for sale, of the estimated retail floor area to be provided by sites to be put up for auction by the government in this financial year, and the percentage of retail floor area in the total floor area to be provided by those sites. And C, if it knows, the proportion of retail floor area to residential floor area in the development projects under the Urban Renewal Authority, or URA, which are in progress or will soon be launched, or whether URA will consider increasing the retail floor area in those projects to meet market demand, given that those development projects are all located in densely populated districts, and whether URA will consider leasing the former Central Market on short-term tenancies for retail purpose before the commencement of the revitalization project for the market. If URA will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for Development. Good morning, President and members of the Council. Retail is one of the major economic activities of Hong Kong. Since the number of mainland visitors to Hong Kong has been on the rise in recent years, the retail market remains vibrant, and the market demand for commercial floor space, especially retail floor space, has also increased. The Hong Kong SAR government noted the situation and has been progressively providing suitable land and ensuring flexibility in land planning and land use so that the market can respond effectively to the ever-changing needs of the retail industry as well as other commercial activities. My reply to the question raised by the Honorable Vincent FANG is as follows. A and B. As set out in the 2013 policy address, the government will continue to adopt a multi-pronged approach to increase the supply of housing land, while at the same time supplying more commercial land and facilities to facilitate the further development of different economic activities, including the retail industry. Examples include the development of Kowloon East, which has the potential to provide an additional commercial floor space of about 4 million square meters into another core business district of Hong Kong, the Kai Tak development area, which has 14 sites with a total area of about 14 hectares zoned commercial, the new Central Harbour Front, which is expected to make available more than 260,000 square meters of commercial floor space. Over the past 2 years, the government has sold a total of 9 commercial or business sites, providing about 400,000 square meters of GFA. The 2013-14 land sales program also offers 9 commercial or business sites which are capable of providing about 330,000 square meters of GFA. As the details of these measures were provided during the discussion of the motion on increasing the business floor areas of the retail industry at the LegCo meeting on the 6th of February, and also in the written reply to the Honorable James Tian's question on demand and supply of commercial sites today, I shall not repeat here. The various economic activities in society, including retail, require commercial land and floor space. The government's role is to increase the supply of appropriate sites, space, and hardware. It would be for the market and the operators to decide how to develop such sites and what types of commercial users should take up the floor space. Operators, be they small or medium enterprises or big businesses, are most knowledgeable about the market conditions, are best placed to respond to the situation and the changing needs flexibly and timely. The government's role is to maintain a fair and open business environment and continuously provide land and supporting hardware so as to enable various commercial activities, including retail, to develop sustainably. There is sufficient flexibility under the current land planning and land use to allow the government to respond to the changing demand for land and facilities for various commercial, including retail, purposes. For example, apart from offices, retail shops is and always permitted use on the land zoned commercial in the central business district and major shopping areas. In the residential Group A zones, retail commercial use in lower 3 stories of the concerned buildings is always permitted. Furthermore, mixed-use zones have in recent years been introduced into the Kai Tak development area and the West Kowloon Cultural District, so as to enhance the flexibility of non-residential users in the buildings there. Developers can continue to propose suitable change of land use for retail business developments or other commercial activities while planning applications. The demand for floor space for various commercial activities, including retail, changes all the time, and operators' modes of business are also quite dynamic. As such, while the government continues to increase the supply of commercial floor space, the government in general will not mandate floor space for a specified commercial use or require a particular proportion of commercial floor space for retail use. As regards question C, the residential and commercial floor areas of the redevelopment projects of the URA are subject to the provisions of the respective outline zoning plans, the buildings ordinance, and the land leases concerned. In general, the maximum plot ratio for commercial use is 1.5 times of the net site area. As the development projects have to comply with the requirements of various fire safety regulations, other relevant ordinances, and the sustainable building design guidelines, the actual commercial floor area made available upon completion may be less than the maximum floor area permitted. To ensure the optimal use of urban land, URA will provide the most appropriate retail floor area in its urban renewal projects in accordance with the proposed uses of the development and subject to the town planning requirements and other relevant stipulations. In May this year, URA submitted a planning application on the Central Market Revitalization Project to the Town Planning Board. Subject to the approval of the Town Planning Board, the project will provide space for commercial, cultural, and/or community users. The revitalized Central Market building will be able to provide about 22,000 square meters of GFA, of which, after deducting the floor area required for the necessary fire service, electrical and mechanical installations, about half will be used for amenity and greening facilities and the rest will be for retail purposes. At present, the Central Market building is a government property. Part of the area along the second-floor passageway of the building has been rented to URA by way of short-term tenancy for operation as the Oasis Gallery. As regards the remaining portion of the area along the passageway, it is currently leased out to 8 commercial tenants for temporary operation on monthly basis. Before officially handing over the market building to URA, the Lands Department will give timely notifications to the tenants to move out in accordance with the terms of the tenancy agreements. In view of the dilapidated state of the other parts of the building, it is considered not suitable for renting out for other users. Mr. Vincent Fang. Since the start of this new term of government, well, it has done a lot in terms of housing. For instance, it has been identifying lands and changed land use for construction of public housing. Of course, I understand that this term of government attaches a lot of significance to housing, but retail floor area and supply would have a major impact on society because it can cause prices to go up and inflation. It has also intensified conflicts between Hong Kong people and mainlanders. In your main reply, the Secretary mentioned 4 million square meters in Kowloon East, and also the Kai Tak development area will have 14 hectares of commercial land. They will only be available in the long term, not in the coming few years. So have you considered possible short-term measures to help? For instance, can industrial buildings be turned to commercial buildings? And in urban PRH estates, there are ground floor car parks. Can they be changed to retail floor space? This is already being done because some of the space occupied NGOs as offices. This is important. If you don't have short-term measures, then you cannot see how you're going to address it in the long term. Secretary for Development. Thank you, Mr. Fang, for your question. I entirely agree that it is urgent and important to provide enough retail floor areas. So in this year's land sales program, we've got 9 commercial business sites which are capable of providing about 330,000 square meters of GFA. Well, 9 sites totaling about 400,000 square meters of GFA was sold in the past 2 years. So this year, you see, we have increased the supply of retail floor area, and we're gradually, there are some sites having their land use changed. So we are working very proactively, both in the short term and long term. Well, we have introduced the revitalization scheme for industrial buildings for a while. And we have extended the period to March 2016. We've approved some applications received in the past. While we may adjust the revitalization scheme, there is not much room to maneuver because we believe the measures we launch are already sufficient. With drastic adjustment, we may not be able to expedite the process of revitalization or wholesale conversion. On the other hand, or rather, that would only cause the prices to go up. So we are not going to introduce major new measures in this regard. I appeal to owners of industrial buildings to apply for redevelopment or wholesale conversion of industrial buildings before or by March 2016. We will discuss with the Transport and Housing Bureau to see whether more car parks of PRH estates can be converted to commercial space. Mr. Gary Chan, I'd like to follow up on the need for commercial land. As you all know, the North District has suffered from problems associated with mainland shoppers. Well, rents and also household commodities have increased. Prices have increased a lot because of that. So is the government going to separate economic activities of local Hong people and that of mainlanders? For instance, at the frontier near Shamjai, will you build dedicated shopping malls for these people, so the Hong Kong people do not have to fight for space in our trams and in shopping malls with the mainlanders. Secretary, developing a retail floor area in NT North. As you all know, there is a boundary crossing at Lok Ma Chau, and Lantau Han Yuen Wai crossing is also being constructed. Can space be made available in these two crossings for retail development so that mainland shoppers can do their shopping there instead of traveling into the urban areas? This will be considered. In Northwest NT and Hong Kong new development areas to be announced later, there will be a substantial land reserved for commercial activities. And on Lantau, when the Hong Kong Macau Bridge Hong Kong section is commissioned on the artificial island for our landing, we are considering commercial or retail areas there to meet the demand of shoppers. And then to the northern part of our airport on Lantau, we are now considering how much land would be available there for retail floor area development. We're discussing with the airport authority. Mr. Tony Zhe, increasing retail GFA, well, the location of sites is just as important as the quantity, because there are vacant shops left idle for a long time, and there are also places where rentals are very high. As you all know, the central market has been left vacant for more than 10 years. And according to the Secretary, most of the building is rather dilapidated. Are you going to put it into better use? In the past 10 years, if we had maintained and repaired the Central Market building, we would have earned a lot in rent. So how much longer is going to be left vacant? If it is it will be for a while. Would the administration consider renting the premises out to tenants, retail tenants? Thank you. Because there was a judicial review against the Central EZP, and as a result, Murray Building car park as well as the Central Market building have been left without any development for a while. However, the judicial review is now settled, so the Murray Building will be sold for a hotel development quite soon. And the URA has also reactivated its plans for the Central Market building. It will expedite the town planning board procedures as well. According to our assessment, the town plan procedures will be completed quite soon. So if we are to renovate the dilapidated parts of the Central Market building for renting and have it recovered quite soon for redevelopment, it may not be appropriate. Mr. Tommy Zhou, thank you. Since the Link REIT has purchased many of our shopping malls, rentals in these shopping malls have increased a lot. As a result, commodity prices have also gone up. The Development Bureau has announced several redevelopment projects of PRH in the urban areas. Is there a percentage or a certain proportion of the land earmarked for commercial use? Perhaps you should increase the proportion of commercial space in these redeveloped PRH estates so that SMEs, local operators can do businesses there. Well, this is under the portfolio of the Transport and Housing Bureau. However, I understand that when PRH estates are redeveloped, there will be ancillary facilities where the site area allows. There will be corresponding proportion or corresponding floor area of commercial use. I will refer Mr. Tommy Zhou's question to the THB for a written reply. Thank you. Mr. Wong Ting Kwang. Mr. Vincent Fang's question proposed increasing retail floor area in traditional shopping areas. For instance, building an underground shopping center in Causeway Bay. I'd like to ask the Secretary whether that can be considered. That is, can we have an underground shopping center? Has any study been done on this, and if yes, the progress? In the CS Policy Address 2013, there's the proposal to consider or to study the possibility of using our underground space because land supply is quite tight, in particular in the urban areas, and land prices are high. So within the government, we have activated the process. We will increase underground space for retail or commercial users. We see whether some facilities at grade or above ground can be moved underground so that we can have more room above ground. And then underground pedestrian links can also be built. Both technical and legal issues are involved. We are going to commission a consultancy for a detailed study. When we have any progress, we will report to the Council. Mr. Andrew Leung. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to follow up on the question of underground shopping centers. Places like Tokyo, where we visit quite frequently, have large shopping centers underground for SMEs to do business. So why can't we have this under public facilities? For instance, under the Victoria Park, we can have underground shopping centers linking up with the shopping malls in Causeway Bay. I hope that the Secretary will not take 5 years to do this. 5 years to take the study. Secretary, thank you. Mr. Andrew Leung mentioned the example of the underground space in Victoria Park. Yes, this is covered in our study. I agree that there are priorities in our study because land titles are involved. We appreciate members' concern. We will take on board this view, and we will report in stages our progress. Mr. Lam Tai Fai. Thank you. The CE has stressed a number of times that economic and livelihood issues will be settled first before consultation on political development will start. Integration of Hong Kong and the mainland has everything to do with our livelihood and economic development. Conflict between Hong Kong people and mainlanders are also important. Now, I've received complaints from the retail industry that fewer mainlanders have come to shop for Hong Kong. I don't know whether that's because of the special stamp duty or the measures to cool down the property market. I'd like to know whether this will have any impact on the need for retail floor area in Hong Kong. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. We have not seen a drop in the number of visitors under the IVS individual visit scheme. And we've seen a rise in business turnover in major public holidays. In the first 5 months of this year, we've seen a 15% rise or 14.5% rise in business turnover. And in terms of the actual volume value, 15% increase. So in the past 5 years, we have not seen a drop in consumption of mainland visitors. In May, we had 12.8% growth in the value of retail business. So regarding retail floor area, it's not just for mainlanders. Local consumption is just as important. About 70% of consumption in the retail industry has come from local people. Thank you.
Question 3, Dr. Elizabeth QUAT. Thank you. It's learned that the Secretary for the Environment has indicated that energy saving is one of the directions of the interim review of the Scheme of Control Agreements, SCA, entered into by the government and the two power companies. Under SCAs, the government will assess the performance of the two power companies based on the number of energy audits they perform for customers and the actual energy saving targets, and a maximum award of 0.02 percentage point in permitted return will be given as an incentive. It has been reported that the actual energy to be saved by customers as specified under SCAs account for only about 0.03% to 0.04% of the annual local electricity sales of the two power companies, and they provide such service only to commercial customers. In this connection, will the government inform this council, A, of the respective annual number of energy audits performed by the two power companies for their customers, the actual energy thus saved, and the amount as well as the ratio of bonus return so earned. Since the implementation of the SCAs, whether the government and the two power companies has set energy saving targets in the past based on any scientific criteria, and whether they had ascertained that such targets were appropriate and feasible based on any standards or researches. B, whether the authorities have assessed if the aforesaid terms of SCAs are operating effectively. If they have, of the outcome, whether the interim review of the SCAs being conducted includes a review of the aforesaid terms. If so, whether they have demanded the two power companies to raise the targets for the energy to be saved for their customers to at least 1% of their annual electricity sales. Require the two power companies to provide energy audit service to domestic customers and prescribe penalties for failure to meet the energy-saving targets, etc., so as to improve the relevant terms, if they have, of the responses of the two power companies so far, and C, whether it has made reference to relevant overseas experience before drawing up the aforesaid terms. If it has, how the mainstream terms adopted by overseas countries compare with the aforesaid terms, if there are differences, of the main reasons for that, and the impact of such differences on the customers of the two power companies. Secretary for the Environment. Mr. President, the administration attaches great importance to the work on environmental protection and energy conservation. Over the past 5 years, 2008 to 12, the GDP of Hong Kong has increased by about 19.6%, and the increase in electricity consumption was about 5.1%, comparing with 8.1% over the first 5 years, 2000 to 2004. The growth rate in electricity consumption has shown a decelerating trend. In respect of energy-saving target, as a member of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, Hong Kong strives to meet the target of reducing energy intensity by at least 45% by 2035, using 2005 as a base year. Through demand-side management measures, we aim to enhance energy efficiency. To effectively promote energy conservation, government's effort alone is not enough. Only by collaboration with the community can the goal be achieved, and power companies have a role to play. My reply to Dr. QUAT's question is as follows. For the first two parts, the current Scheme of Control Agreements, SCAs, signed between the government and the two power companies, provide financial incentives in respect of energy saving and energy audit, to encourage the two power companies to enhance energy efficiency performance. Regarding energy audits, if the number of energy audits completed in a year for their customers meets the target, they can obtain an incentive of 0.01% on the average net fixed asset value for that year. The energy audit target for CLP Hong Kong is 150 cases or above per annum, and for Hong Kong Electric, Hong Kong E, 50 cases or above. As regards energy saving, if the amount of energy saving for a year by the power companies meets the target, they can obtain an incentive of 0.01% on the average net fixed asset value for that year. The energy saving target for CLP is 12 gigawatt per hour or above per annum, and Hong Kong E, 3 gigawatts per hour or above. The energy-saving targets were drawn up after discussions with the two power companies, striking a balance among various considerations including power companies' forecast, market reaction, and cost-effectiveness. The government reviews the energy efficiency performance of the power companies in accordance with the SCAs. Over the past 4 years, since the current SCAs came into effect in 2008 and 2009, the two power companies have completed over 850 cases of energy audits and received incentive of about 55 million in total. Furthermore, CLP has saved over 60 gigawatt per hour of electricity and received incentive of about 35 million. I'd like to stress that there are strict requirements in the SCAs that the energy-saving performance of the two power companies must be assessed in accordance with the aggregate energy-saving attributable to the improvement works carried out by customers based on the energy audits conducted by the companies for them. This is to ensure that the power company's energy-saving performance is supported by objective data before they can receive the financial incentive. The current SCAs run for a term of 10 years and will expire in 2018. The SCAs stipulate clearly that the government and the two power companies shall have the right during 2013 to request modification of any part of the current SCAs. A mutual agreement is needed before implementing any proposed modification. The government has engaged experts, academics, green groups, and other stakeholders on the midterm review and relevant energy matters to solicit their views. We've also attended meetings of the panel on economic development of the LegCo to listen to views of members and deputations. We understand that the public are concerned about the energy efficiency performance of the power companies, and we've included this in the midterm review. We're currently carrying out the review with the two power companies. We expect to complete the review by the end of 2013 and will brief the LegCo and the public on the outcome. In relation to Part C, the electricity market in Hong Kong is mainly regulated by the SCAs, which stipulate the rights and obligations of the power companies, as well as the government's role in monitoring the power companies' financial and technical performance. There is no relevant overseas experience in respect of the provisions in the SCAs concerning energy audits and energy-saving performance for direct reference. We're aware that different countries and regions formulate different energy-saving measures having regard to their local circumstances and objectives. In Hong Kong, we promote energy efficiency and conservation mainly through legislation, policy, and public participation. For example, the Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance was fully implemented in September last year to improve energy efficiency of major building services installations such as air conditioning and lifts. We're also constructing a first-of-its-kind district cooling system to provide more energy-efficient air conditioning system to non-domestic developments at Kai Tak Development. To strengthen coordination among bureaus and departments, the government has set up an interdepartmental steering committee for the promotion of green building, led by me, to formulate implementation strategies and action plans for the promotion of green building in both the private and public sectors. The government has also led by example by setting in 2009 the target of achieving 5% saving in the total electricity consumption in government buildings from 2009 and 10 to 2013-14. Using the electricity consumption in 2007 and 8 as the baseline and under comparable operating conditions. In 2011 and 12, the saving in electricity consumption in government buildings on the basis reached 8.3%, which exceeded the original target. We've also been promoting territory-wide participation in energy saving through various activities. For example, we've launched the Energy Saving Charter on indoor temperature and the Energy Saving Charter on no incandescent light bulbs, to encourage the community to reduce consumption through air conditioning and to refrain from using energy-inefficient light bulbs. Furthermore, to encourage customers to select more energy-efficient products, we've implemented the energy efficiency labeling schemes and are considering expanding the scheme to cover more products. Dr. QUAT. A lot of my questions are not answered with specific details by the Secretary. This is a trend. Say, for example, EU and the US, through mandatory measures, companies are required to meet the energy-saving targets. and they have reached about 1 to 2.5%. Compared to these overseas jurisdictions, there is a great room for improvement in Hong Kong. The Secretary said that energy saving will be a major scope in the midterm review. So what are the specific details in this regard? The Secretary said that there are energy targets set for the two power companies at 0.03 and 0.04%. Well, CLP reached the target, but Hong Kong failed to do so, which is left out by the Secretary. So is there improvement, room for improvement? Will there be any improvements in the interim, say, for example, set down penalties for failure to meet these saving targets? Because you need the stick on top of the carrot. Secretary. Thank you, Ms. QUAT, for the follow-up question. In Hong Kong, when we set down energy-saving targets, we cannot introduce a direct comparison with overseas jurisdictions because we have to take into a local situation through legislation, through mobilizing the community to introduce measures to meet these targets. What is most important is to seize the opportunity using the midterm review to review the existing mechanism, to put in place incentives and penalties. I'd like to say some more on this. Say, for example, the two power companies make recommendations for energy saving, and then customers introduce devices or measures, and as a result, energy is saved. And this will reduce energy carbon emission and enhance energy conservation. The power companies are working with the customers to save energy. Say, for example, after energy audit, there will be measures put in place. We monitor the performance of the two power companies. We understand the public is concerned about any room for improvement for the power companies in terms of energy saving. We've listened and heard different views, and we have incorporated these issues in the midterm review. We're working with the two power companies and having discussions with them. We reckon that at the end of this year, we will be able to complete the review and we'll brief you the results. In short, we will keep our ears open and incorporate these issues in the review and in due course release the findings to you. What hasn't been answered? So about the 1% of energy saving target we proposed, will it be considered, Secretary? Basically, various civic groups, stakeholders and some legislators made proposals to increase the energy saving target to 1%. And they've also made suggestions about prescribing penalties. We give due considerations for various comments and incorporate these issues in the midterm review. So we will positively consider these suggestions. Mr. Stephen Ho. I think the Secretary has failed to answer Ms. QUAT's questions, so I'll ask again. In overseas countries, their energy targets can be as high as 1 to 2.5%, but here in Hong Kong, it's just 0.03 to 0.04%. Why is there such a huge difference? Is there some kind of a review mechanism in place? Well, Ms. QUAT proposes as 1%. This is not unattainable. I'd like to get some answers from the Secretary. Secretary. I thank member for the supplementary. Basically, for each country, there is a different pace of development. So it's impossible to draw a direct comparison or reference and to work out the percentage. Say, for example, for European countries, that they're more advanced in their development. So when it comes to reduction of emission, they will be more aggressive than us. and we're talking about the energy saving targets for the two power companies or that for Hong Kong as a whole. We can't mix these two up because they're two separate measures. And I said that for Hong Kong, we are a member of the APEC. We have committed to meet the target of reducing energy intensity by at least 45% by 2013 using 2005 as a base year. So different countries have different approaches. And as to whether we have incorporated 1% of targets of energy saving targets as the interim review, we will include that in as part of the issues of the review. We think that for certain issues, it's not appropriate to release information prematurely. Mr. Tan Ka-biu. Thank you. The Environment Bureau and the two power companies said that they would advocate energy savings or conservation. And of course, natural gas is expensive, so the more energy is consumed, then the more natural gas will be consumed. For the two power companies, especially CLP, the charging system is heavily criticized. Say, for example, for CLP, for non-domestic customers, they have the regressive scale. So the more energy you consume, then the less you will spend on energy tariff. And it in a way encourages shops to not switch off their lights at night. So will you ask the CLP to dispense with the regressive structure of their tariff? Secretary, thank you, member, for the question. We heard different views from the community in relation to energy saving targets and relevant issues. We will incorporate the views in the midterm review. Mr. Gary Fan. My question is about penalties. As we all know, that under the SCA, when it comes to energy efficiency, the target is too low, and as members said, we only have incentives without any penalties. When I say it's too low, because for the CLP and Hong Kong E, as long as they reach 0.03 or 0.04% of annual local electricity sales, then they have reached the target, and it's way too low. And Hong Kong E has never reached the target of 0.03%. So I'd like to ask if they have considered in the midterm review introduce penalties so that the target will be more effective. Secretary, I thank Mr. Fan for the question. I believe there is a general view in the community asking for enhancing the energy saving target and there are also different views about introducing penalties. We've heard similar views, and they are incorporated in the midterm review. We will discuss with the two power companies, hoping to respond to community aspirations. Mr. Porter, as far as I understand that the scheme is restricted to commercial customers and not domestic customers. Why? Is it because it's too tedious and trivial? Can these energy saving targets be introduced for the entire buildings as to encourage OCs to adopt measures to reduce energy consumption and save on tariffs? Secretary, Mr. Zhao is right. For big spenders of tariffs, of course, buildings accounts for the largest energy consumption. So if we are to promote energy conservation and efficiency, we have to first target big users. For domestic households, they account for a smaller percentage. Even for common areas, the energy is mainly used for air conditioning and lighting. As a whole, the energy consumption is smaller. So our idea is to target non-domestic customers who use the most of electricity. This will be our target, and there are justifications. And if there are views to focus both on domestic and non-domestic, we will consider that.
The fourth question, Mr. Kenneth LEUNG. Mr. President, it has been reported recently the way in which a former commissioner of the Independent Commission Against Corruption handled expenses on official entertainment, bestowal of gifts and duty visits during his term of office have aroused public concern and serious damage image and reputation of the ICAC. For a number of members of the public have pointed out that it was likely that the former commissioner had adopted such practice for the purpose of building social network that's conducive to post-service advancement. In this connection, the government informed its council whether it has established guidelines for the appointment of the commissioner to assist CE in identifying suitable candidate for appointment as commissioner, whether the authoritative objective criteria for determining the suitability of candidates for the post of commissioner, whether it will consider conducting open recruitment for the post of commissioner, establishing a selection board. B, whether it will review the mechanism for appointment of the commission and give priority to retired judges, retired public officers with good reputation in considering candidates for the post of commissioner, so as to prevent the occurrence of the situation of the commissioner utilizing his official capacity during his term of office to build a social network that is conducive to his post-service advancement. And C, whether it has formulated guidelines to govern the commissioner's post-service employment business arrangements, whether the authorities have in place measures to prevent the commissioner's discharge of duties from being affected by his concerns about the chance of being appointed to certain public offices after leaving the office, if there are such measures, of the details. The Chief Secretary for the Administration. Mr. President, the question of Mr. Kenneth LEUNG mentions that the way in which the former commissioner of the ICAC handled expenses on official entertainment, bestowal of gifts and duty visits during his terms of office has given rise to community concerns. I wish to take this opportunity to reiterate that the ICAC has, since its establishment, devoted itself to anti-corruption work, and it has successfully upheld Hong Kong's core value of fairness and probity. We understand that the public attaches great importance to work ICAC and has a very high expectation of personal integrity of ICAC personnel, in particular that of senior management. The administration attaches great importance to the incident and handles it seriously in order to maintain public confidence in the ICAC. The Chief Executive announced on May 2nd this year the establishment of an independent review committee to review ICAC's regulatory systems, procedures for handling expenses of official entertainment, gifts and duty visits, including arrangement for application, reimbursement approval, review the compliance of ICAC staff of all ranks during the term of the former commissioner with the regulatory systems and procedures, and make recommendations on any measure conducive to improving the above systems and procedures. The IRC will submit its report to the CE within 4 months. The report of the IRC will be released to the public except any parts which may need to be dealt with separately for legal reasons. My response to 3 parts of the question is as follows. A, pursuant to Article 57 Basic Law, a Commission Against Corruption shall be established in the Hong Kong SAR. It shall function independently and be accountable to CE. Pursuant to Article 48 of the Basic Law, CE nominates reports to the CPG for appointment all principal officials, including Commissioner of ICAC. Article 61 of the Basic Law stipulates that the principal officials of HKSAR shall be Chinese citizens who are permanent residents of the region with no right of vote in any foreign country and have ordinarily resided in Hong Kong for a continuous period of no less than 15 years. We consider it is not necessary to have other requirements. B, consistent with the appointment of other principal officials, CE handles the appointment of Commissioner of ICAC by strictly adhering to the requirements under Basic Law, and credentials, experience, abilities, as well as personality integrity are also the basis of appointing a Commissioner, so that the ICAC can exercise its statutory functions effectively and uphold Hong Kong's core value of property and fairness. Giving priority to retired judges or retired public officers in the appointment of the Commissioner will, on the contrary, confine the inclusion of different talents. We therefore do not consider it appropriate. C. There are specific requirements on the employment business arrangement of the Commissioner upon leaving his office. By virtue of his employment contract, the regulatory post office employment and business arrangement of the incumbent Commissioner are comparable to those applicable to politically appointed officials. For instance, 1. Within the control period 1 year after stepping down from office, the Commissioner is prohibited from representing any person in connection with any claim, action, demanding proceedings, transaction, or negotiation against or with government, and from engaging in any lobbying activities on matter relating to government. And 2. Within the control period of 1 year after stepping down from office, the Commissioner shall first seek advice from a committee, the members of which shall be determined by CE before commencing any employment, becoming a director or partner in any business profession, or starting a business profession on his own account or with others. According to the employment contract, the committee will, in tendering its advice, consider, among other factors, 1. Whether the proposed employment or appointment and any consequential associations necessary and directly incidental therefore has adversely affected or compromised or will adversely compromise the government's performance of its functions, whether the proposed employment or appointment would give rise to any reasonable belief, concern, or public perception of the government's performance of functions during the term of office of the officer, and within 1 year thereafter could have been or adversely affected, compromised, whether proposed employment, appointment will or are likely to cause reasonable negative public perception, whether the proposed employment or appointment would enable prospective employer business to gain any unfair advantage over competitors by making use of privileged information. 5. Whether his right to work and to exploit his technical skills experience would be unreasonably restricted. Mr. Kenneth LEUNG. Mr. President, I've expected that the Chief Secretary will recite the relevant articles in the Basic Law, in particular to Part A of my question. She says we consider it's not necessary to have other requirements in addition to those set out in the Basic Law. But the Basic Law is just a framework. I want to ask the Chief Secretary why, under the Basic Law, the administration will not set out more specific conditions, and why can't there be a selection committee to select the Commissioner? The Chief Secretary, I've already said that according to the Basic Law, the CE nominates and reports to the CPG for appointment all principal officials. Setting up a selection committee is not appropriate. Mr. Leung's question, in fact, has been answered in Part B. We are not going to set other conditions because if we set that, these conditions that will go contrary to the inclusion of different talents. Mr. Wong Yok-man, the former Commissioner, Timothy Tong, had a scandal, and this council sets up a select committee, and the PAC looks into that as well. Using Mr. Wong's term is a waste of public money, although I do not agree with him. Madam Chief Secretary, when he was the Commissioner, we suspected that he had already accepted the appointment to be a member of the CPPCC. When he stepped down, he immediately became a member of CPPCC. During his term of office, he had contacts with the non-procuratorate, non-judiciary officers, and he has strings with the liaison office. And he was appointed as the Chinese People's Political Consultative Committee. I asked what are the duties of CPCCC members. He doesn't know that. What's your question? Why he can immediately become a member of the CPPCC? The Chief Secretary. The former secretaries, or rather the former commissioners' employment or appointment after office is the same as the mechanism for politically appointed officials. There is an arrangement that is always there is an appointment that is always approved generally during the control period, and that include, among other posts, a member of the CPPCC. This is this is it has no remuneration and is not of any business nature. Is it put down in the clause that accepting the membership of CPPCC is in that? Is it in the provisions in the law? Is it in the Constitution? The Chief Secretary, the Secretary. The simple answer is the affirmative. Now, to answer his question, now according to this post office employment restriction, the appointment of free service that includes academic or frontline non-academic or frontline non-business work, non-business regional or international office, and also central office of central institution of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Leung Chi-chang, the incident of the former commissioner in respect of gifts and drinking and meals, those have raised public concern. Within the civil service guidelines, are there rules stipulating that officials during office hours and also during visits, are there any restrictions on drinking? Say, for example, no consumption of strong liquor or no consumption of expensive liquor. Say, with regard to the police and the customs and excise department, they've bought a lot of liquor. And are there such restrictions? Mr. Leung, I think your question is not related to the main body of the question. Mr. President, Mr. Kenneth LEUNG mentioned bestowal of gifts and official entertainment and also drinks. So it's related. Now, Mr. Leung's main question is about the appointment of the commissioner. It's about the system for appointment of the commissioner. You have to think how your question is related to this question. The pronunciation in Cantonese is "zhao" rather than "za." Please think again. I'll give you a chance. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Mr. President. In appointing principal officials, including the commissioner, has all along been appointing the officers basing on capabilities and talent. Now, because of high expectations, people have strong views concerning the behavior of certain officials, including Mr. Timothy Tong. Things have changed. I want to ask the CS, in considering the candidates, will the administration consider the person's habits and preference for whether he or she is suitable for the job? For example, he or she doesn't like drinks. In appointing major or principal officials, the primary consideration is abilities and personal integrity. In appointing senior officials, there has to be integrity checks. And doing in-depth integrity checks, the personal behavior of a certain candidate may be considered as if one is easily subject to external influence. Mr. Leung, we'd like to rephrase the question. Now, say, if a civil servant taking the opportunity of entertainment and receiving gifts, and or in giving gifts, he tried to get better places after post office employment. Would there be any restrictions? You may remember that there is a case that caused wide public concern in respect of post-employment of civil servants. The administration has conducted a comprehensive review with regard to the application of post office employment of directorate officers. There are several principles, or 8 principles. One is that by giving the approval, whether that will give rise to any reasonable belief, concern, or public perception that there is any deferment of reward. Now, is there any restriction in terms of reputation? I have nothing more to add. Mr. Ronnie Tong, since reunification, wrong appointments among the SARG have been very common, and this is even more common in this term of the government. Would the administration consider in appointing important officers, such as the commissioner for the ICAC, will ask the CE to authorize an independent committee to consider the appointment? Now, the present appointment arrangement is not transparent, and people have the impression that he is just appointing his close associates. Will the CS consider, say, setting up a selection committee to do that? In my main reply, I say that there is no need to have something outside the basic law to set up other conditions or committees. Ms. Elizabeth QUAT. Thank you, Mr. President. With the widespread of political activities, the fair reward is not just limited to monetary rewards, but there are also political rewards. Only 5.17 has the restriction that upon within 1 year of the stepping down, the person shouldn't engage in any lobbying activities on matters relating to the government. Will the administration provide more detailed restrictions in the future in terms of political reward? With regard to post office employment or appointment for political appointed officials, now these political appointed officials may just work for 1 term or 5 years, and that is very different from the civil servants. We need to find a suitable balance between public concerns and the individual's personal rights, and we think that we have struck a suitable balance. I'm talking about political rewards or political benefits, not appointments. The Chief Secretary, it's difficult to define what's meant by political benefits or rewards. The committee, in considering the appointment or employment, will consider various factors. Dr. K.K. Kwok, the former commissioner of ICAC, Timothy Tong, had a scandal and people lost confidence in the ICAC. And the reply of the Chief Secretary, she just denied the questions raised by Mr. Kenneth LEUNG. Does she mean that with regard to the appointments, election, and post-office arrangements, the administration will not conduct any review? And the issue of being a member of CPPCC is rather controversial. Will the administration include that post as those that cannot be accepted after during post office in respect of post office appointments? Chief Secretary, now we are willing to conduct a review upon any important matters, and that includes the review in 2011, which is the review on the post-employment arrangement for directorate officers. And guidelines and standards have been set up. Last year, Chief Justice Lee has also chaired an independent committee and made many recommendations, and we are following up the recommendations. As for the former commissioner's case, there are 4 things going on, and after such investigations, we may conduct reviews if necessary. My question is very clear concerning membership of CPPCC. Can that membership be the kind of political appointment that cannot be accepted? Well, we have no intention to do that. As I've read out, the CPPCC is a central institution, and that falls within the non-commercial and no remuneration posts. And I see no reason for barring that. Mr. Po-Chet, under 3B of the main reply, it seems that the restriction is only limited to business and professional appointments or employments. But these appointments, some appointments are very welcome in the mainland, and such appointments carry with them some business benefits, directly or indirectly. Will the administration include it under 3B? And such appointments should be considered by a committee rather than just an appointment that can be accepted and that can be approved at any time. At present, the line is drawn between is commercial or non-commercial, whether it's remunerated or non-remunerated. As I've said, with regard to the incident involving the former commissioner, there are 4 investigations, and if such investigations lead to strong views for tightening the restrictions, we'll seriously consider them. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Mr. President, I hope the Chief Secretary can be more specific. Apart from the requirements of the Basic Law, why can't we work under the framework of the Basic Law and have more specific conditions and requirements with regard to post-office employment and appointment in respect of commercial, non-commercial nature or remunerated, non-remunerated nature? Can there be other conditions as well? We cannot ignore the political benefits. We cannot bury our head in the sand. Madam, the Chief Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Leung's question is about appointment. In appointing principal officials, including the Commissioner for the ICAC, Commissioner of ICAC, we believe we don't need to add any conditions. As for post-office appointment and employment, we have a mechanism, and the mechanism can be adjusted according to public concerns. As for this case, and the concerns arising from that, there are 4 investigations going on, and it is not appropriate to make any amendments now.
Question 5. Mr. K.K. Fung. President, Article 30 of the Basic Law stipulates that the freedom and privacy of communication of Hong Kong residents shall be protected by law. No department or individual may on any grounds infringe upon the freedom and privacy of communication of residents, except that the relevant authorities may inspect communication in accordance with legal procedures to meet the needs of public security or of investigation into criminal offences. At present, the interception of communications and specified kinds of covert surveillance operations by public officers are regulated by the Interception of Communications and Surveillance Ordinance, the Ordinance. In order to obtain authorization, the investigation operations concerned must be carried out for the purpose of preventing or detecting serious crime or protecting public security. At the same time, the 2 vetting and approval criteria of proportionality and necessity must also be met. However, the ordinance only governs the interception of communications and covert surveillance operations by law enforcement agencies and is not applicable to non-government parties, individuals, or countries. In this connection, will the government inform this Council A, whether the authorities have examined or assessed the collection of confidential information in the communication of residents and infringement upon the privacy of residents in Hong Kong by bodies or individuals outside local law enforcement agencies, including non-government parties or individuals, private organizations, government intelligence services of foreign countries and the mainland, etc., if they have of the outcome, whether they have detected any interception of communications and covert surveillance operations carried out by such organizations in Hong Kong, if they have of the details, whether the government or individual law enforcement agencies have obtained through such organizations relevant information or intelligence which clearly involved infringement upon the privacy of communication of Hong Kong residents, if so, of the details. B. Of the regulation under existing legislation of the operations carried out in Hong Kong by bodies or individuals outside local law enforcement agencies, including non-government parties or individuals, private organizations, government intelligence services of foreign countries and the mainland, etc., which infringe upon the freedom and privacy of communication of residents, whether it has assessed if such legislation has been enacted to counter such kind of operations. And C. Given that the private organizations and organizations outside Hong Kong are not governed by the ordinance, and the authorities had stated clearly when the ordinance was enacted that the relevant conduct of non-government parties, individuals would not be dealt with at that stage, whether the authorities will now consider introducing legislation to regulate such matters with a view to further implementing the requirement under Article 30 of BL on protection of freedom and privacy of communication of Hong Kong residents by law, if they will not of the reasons for that. Secretary for CMA. President, the members' questions relate to policy areas of various government departments, including Security Bureau, CEDB, CMAB, and I give below a reply as consolidated from information provided by the bureaus concerned. Article 30 of BL specifies that freedom and privacy of communication of Hong Kong residents shall be protected by law. No department or individual may on any grounds infringe upon the privacy of communication and freedom of residents, except that the relevant authorities may inspect communication in accordance with legal procedures to meet the needs of public security or of investigation into criminal offences. Between 1996 and 2006, the LRC published 5 reports relating to different aspects of privacy, including the following 2 reports on intercepting or interfering intentionally with communications in progress and obtaining personal information through intrusion into private premises or by means of a surveillance device. A. The report on regulating the interception of communications published in December 1996. The report recommended that it should be an offence to intercept or interfere intentionally with communications, i.e. a telecommunication sealed postal packet or transmission by radio or frequencies which are not licensed for broadcast unless interception was carried out pursuant to a court warrant. B. The report on regulation on covert surveillance published in March 2006. The report recommended the creation of 2 new criminal offences. Number 1, entering or remaining on private premises as a trespasser with an intent to observe, overhear, or obtain personal information. Number 2, placing, using, servicing, or removing a sense-enhancing, transmitting or recording device, whether inside or outside the premises, with the intention of obtaining personal information relating to individuals inside the premises in circumstances where those individuals will be considered to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. In the light of the recommendations relating to public officers in the above 2 reports, the government enacted the Interception of Communications and Surveillance Ordinance, ICSO, in August 2006 to regulate the interception of communications and covert surveillance operations conducted by the law enforcement agencies, LEAs, with a stringent statutory regime. The purpose and scope of the ICSO is to regulate LEAs' lawful interception of communications and covert surveillance operations for the prevention and detection of serious crimes and protection of public security. The ordinance is not applicable to non-public officers and cannot be used to apply to non-governmental bodies and individuals. LEAs are required by the ICSO to obtain an authorization from a panel judge or a designated authorizing officer prior to any interception of communications and covert surveillance operations. In accordance with Sections 4 and 5 of the ordinance, no LEA shall directly or indirectly, whether through any person or otherwise, conduct any interception or covert surveillance except for any interception or covert surveillance carried out pursuant to a prescribed authorization. There are several pieces of legislation which regulate the interception of communications in Hong Kong. A. Section 24 of Telecommunications Ordinance Cap 106 does not allow a telecommunications officer or any person who, though not a telecommunications officer, has official duties in connection with a telecommunication service to willfully intercept any message. B. Section 27 of the same ordinance imposes prohibition on any person who damages, removes, or interferes with a telecommunications installation with intent to intercept or discover the contents of a message. See Section 29 of Postal Ordinance, Post Office Service ordinance states no person shall open any postal packet or take any contents out of the packet or have any in his possession any packet or mail bag or any of the contents of any of such a packet or mail bag or delay any postal packet or mail bag. If such activities involve collection of personal data, they're subject to provisions of PDPO. The hacking of the computer system is dealt with mainly by Section 161 of Crimes Ordinance, obtains access to computer with intent to commit an offense or dishonest intent, and Section 27A of TO. As for the regulation of non-public officers, government has examined the two reports. We need to carefully consider whether the conduct of non-public officers in this respect should be regulated, given that when the reports were published, Hong Kong media sector and journalists expressed their worry that the recommendations might compromise press freedom. So the government will consider very carefully views from all parties concerned and ensure different interests are properly safeguarded and will not take action lightly. As a matter of fact, the recommendations in the 5 LRC reports all touch on the sensitive and controversial issue on how to strike a balance between the protection of individual privacy rights and freedom of the media. There have been mixed responses and divergent views from different sectors of the community. The government has to reconcile the differences and balance the legitimate interests of all parties with a view to forging a consensus within the community on the way forward. Given the complexity and sensitivity of the issues involved, we are handling the 5 reports by stages and will determine the way forward after discussions with the parties concerned. We consider the report on stalking to be comparatively less controversial than the other reports, and so we'll deal with it first. A public consultation exercise was conducted between December 2011 and March last year to gauge public views on the recommendations, but a consensus was not reached. The public, the media, and other sectors had grave concerns about the likely impact of the recommendations on the freedom of the press and freedom of expression. The administration attaches great importance to concerns on the protection of press freedom. We're studying the views collected and related issues and have commissioned a study by a consultant in this regard in order to map out the way forward. Likewise, on the question of regulating non-public officers in interception activities, the government will consider the need for further protection on the basis of the existing laws, while at the same time bearing in mind the need to take into account other policies considerations such as upholding press freedom. Mr. KK Fong, President, question part 1 is not answered. I was asking whether the Hong Kong administration had made use of information collected by other organizations via tapping. In not answering my question, does it mean that there was such a thing happened? And I asked also about further legislation, and the administration said that it is because of concern for press freedom. But Snowden tells us in other countries, interception is being used. Hong Kong people our system are being hacked into. So will there be any legislation against other organizations or other countries tapping into our system? Secretary, in fact, in the main reply, one of the paragraph is about Section 4 and 5 of the ICSO. And the LEAs cannot conduct any direct or indirect interception of communications or covert surveillance operations, and they cannot rely on other people to conduct such activities. I think the question has been answered. For the other part in the question, on the basis of the ordinances I've quoted, we're happy to listen to public views to see whether there should be further protection. But we have to consider protection for press freedom. Question not answered. I'm asking about intelligence organizations, the overseas and in the mainland. I think this part has not been answered. Under the relevant ordinances, we offer a certain extent of regulation on non-public officers. Just today, from the news report, there is a story about a system being hacked into. The case is now being followed up by the police and the PCPD. Whether we should offer further protection, we can always consider that. Mr. Martin Liao. After the Snowden incident, we understand that our computer system is subject to substantial threats of hacking. The public is concerned whether the administration is well equipped to protect public against such attacks. As I understand, the Technology Crime Unit under CCB of the police is now responsible for handling such crimes. Will there be any timetable to enhance this unit? Thank you, Mr. Liao. My apologies. I don't have information as to whether the Security Bureau have any further thoughts about your opinion. The administration will keep ahead with time, especially when we know what we know recently. We see whether we have to upgrade our manpower and resources. I'm sure Mr. Liu can follow up on this matter on other occasions with colleagues from SB. Mr. Wong Ten Kwong. Hacker intrusion is regulated under ICSO. But most of these offenses related to overseas organizations or individuals. So how can the administration enforce the law when the culprits are overseas? As for CED, we have to look at individual cases before we take any action. But we do need firewall and encrypt our data to protect our system. For hacker intrusion into local system, ordinances quoted in the main reply will be invoked to offer protection to the public. And when overseas citizens are involved, will encounter difficulty in collecting evidence, but will liaise with overseas organizations and administrations in collecting evidence. Dr. Ann Chang, the U.S. hack into systems around the world, and it's difficult to put an end to that. Mr. Snowden said Hong Kong IX of the CUHK has been hacked into. And from the report, we understand that the personal data of 63 teachers and students from CUHK have been made public in an overseas website. We can say we will arrest people who hack into other systems, but Secretary, I'm sure you know it's difficult to arrest these people. So will the administration consider allocating resources to create our own antivirus system? I know we're relying on systems produced in the US, so can we develop our own antivirus systems? Secretary for CED. There are many of such antivirus software in the market for public to choose from. To develop a system locally, whether there's a room for that. I also know about the recent case involving CUHK, as mentioned by Dr. Chang. The police is following up on that. We have liaised and talked to CUHK on the case involving HKIX. The server of HKIX is a separate one from the one you just mentioned. And the two networks are separate ones. And the two systems are managed by different professionals. So this particular incident has not affected Hong Kong IX. Mrs. Lin Cheng-kai. The Secretary did not answer the question of Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Cap 200 of Section 161 and Section 24 of TO are does not provide for extraterritorial rights. Will such rights be included in the two sections I mentioned? In fact, in 2002, the administration attempted to make an order, and LegCo had two meetings under a select committee. Questions were raised, but the administration did not give much response, and the order was not voted in LegCo. Now, more than 10 years have passed. I want to know, will the two sections be reviewed so that we can provide for extraterritorial rights under Cap 461. Which Secretary? I can pass the message on to DOJ. Mr. Kwok Him. Thank you, President. In the main reply, there is a recap on what happened between 1996 and 2006 about what the LLC has done. There were reports on intercepting of communications and on surveillance device. And some recommendations were put forward under ICSO. Well, in fact, the ICSO is not applicable to non-public officers and non-governmental bodies and individuals. According to the revelations of Snowden, we understand that the intelligence service of the US has hacked into our system. We already have an ordinance in place, but it is not applicable to non-public officers. It's because the administration wants to protect for privacy. But will the administration consider regulating overseas non-public officers as well as local non-public officers so as to ensure there will not be any infringement on locals' privacy? Secretary for CMA. Mr. Ip's question is similar to previous follow-up questions in that it is related to ICSO. The ordinance regulates the acts of LEAs only at present. But there is a certain penalty and regulation on LEAs. There have been prosecutions but no conviction. As for regulating non-public officers or overseas non-public officers hacking into our systems, there are provisions for such regulation under the Crime Ordinance. In relation to the latest situation and on the basis of existing legal framework, we will consider whether there is room for further protection. In doing so, we also consider cyber security, national security, press freedom. And sometimes these elements may come into conflict, but we have to strike a balance between all these. We will respond to the latest situations in coming up with any necessary political any decisions. We're following up on the matter of Snowden. And we can only offer any specific information as to what we can do in accordance with the law after we've understood the issue. Question not answered. I'm talking about foreign non-public officers, not exactly those who are presently overseas. Will they be regulated? For foreign non-public officers or those who are diplomats, about regulating the acts, I think I answered this part of question last week. We have spent over 23 minutes and a half on this question.
Last question, Dr. N. Zhang. President, in the first 4 months of this year, the Consumer Council received 122 complaints in relation to intermediaries of foreign domestic helpers, or FDHs, which is a sharp increase of 60% from 75 cases for the same period last year. The subject of complaints include overcharging of fees, the services provided not meeting the descriptions, and FDHs employing various tactics to make employers terminate the employment contracts. Some employers have indicated that since the Philippine government has recently prohibited the collection of placement fees by intermediaries from domestic helpers working overseas, such fees have been passed on to the employers in Hong Kong. Some of the employers have therefore hired Indonesian domestic helpers instead. However, prior to their coming to Hong Kong, such helpers usually have to sign loan documents with the intermediaries in Indonesia and then repay the loans with their wages by installments. Some employers have suspected that for the purpose of early settlement of loans, the newly employed FDHs have deliberately displayed bad attitude to make the employers terminate the contracts with them so that they can get 1 month's wages in lieu of notice and free passages to return to their places of domicile. However, they return to work in Hong Kong again after merely departing from Macau once, without actually returning to their places of domicile. In this connection, with government informed this council, A, given that the government may allow an FDH to change employer without having to return to the place of domicile under certain circumstances, such as employer being unable to continue with the contract because of migration, death, or financial difficulty, or there is evidence that the FDH has been abused. Of the following figures in the past 3 years, the number of such cases approved, the respective numbers of FDHs who had not completed the 2-year contracts and had returned to their places of domicile, as well as those who had returned to work in Hong Kong after departing from Macau, and the number whose employment contracts had been prematurely terminated, and the percentage of such number in the total number of FDHs. B, given that the authorities have stipulated that employers have to give FDHs free passages to return to their places of domicile upon termination of contracts, what measures the authorities have in place to ensure that the FDHs whose contracts have been terminated with free return passages provided actually return to their places of domicile? In cases where the FDHs return to work in Hong Kong, again after departing from Macau once, without actually returning to their places of domicile, whether the authorities will require the FDHs to refund the passages. If not, whether the administration will consider revising the requirements. C, whether the authorities will consider introducing FDHs from other regions to increase the supply and to alleviate employers' pressure arising from the need to pay expensive intermediary charges. If they will, of the details; if not, why not? Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, my response to Dr. Honourable Cheung's inquiry is as follows. A, in the past 3 years, the Immigration Department approved a total of 20,173 applications from foreign domestic helpers of FDHs for change of employers in Hong Kong after premature termination of their contracts under some special circumstances. Of these, 7,049 cases were approved in 2010, 6,560 in 2011, and 6,564 in 2012. Immigration Department does not maintain statistics concerning the numbers of FDHs who had not completed a 2-year contract and had returned to their places of domicile, as well as those who had returned to work in Hong Kong after departing from Macau, and the number of FDHs whose employment contract had been prematurely terminated, and a percentage of such number in the total number. B, in accordance with Clause 7 of the Standard Employment Contract, employers have to provide the free passages to his or her place of origin on termination or expiry of the contract. The rationale is that as it is the employers who hire the FDHs to work in Hong Kong, they have the responsibility to ensure that their smooth return upon completion or premature termination of contract. Otherwise, they may be stranded in Hong Kong. The same requirement also applies to other employers who hire foreign workers from overseas, such as the Supplementary Labour Scheme. The administration has no plan to change the policy. Immigration Department has all along been assessing the FDH's employment visa applications in a serious manner. In assessing the visa application to work for another employer after termination or expiry of contract, Immigration Department will conduct a movement record check to ensure that they have been out of Hong Kong before the new visa is issued. If the applicant is suspected to have any FS records or breaches, including abuse of the arrangement, Immigration Department will consider refusing the applications. Immigration Department has already strengthened the assessment of suspected abuse, such as examining the frequency and reasons of contract termination. Future applications for employment visa will be refused if the abuse is substantiated. C, the existing entry arrangement for FDHs is applicable to most countries and regions. Owing to immigration and security considerations, the current arrangement doesn't apply to the mainland, Macau, and Taiwan, as well as nationals from a few countries like Afghanistan, Cambodia, Cuba, Laos, DPRK, Nepal, and Vietnam. We will regularly review the immigration policies, including those for importation of FDHs, to ensure that such policies suit the actual circumstances and needs of Hong Kong. Dr. N. Cheung. Mr. Frankie Yik. President, thank you. I don't think the Secretary has answered the main part of Dr. N. Cheung's question. There are some foreign domestic helpers who are seeking termination of the contract and how they should be dealt with. Now, when we talked with the CE about the policy address, we talked about this because this problem has been around for some time in Hong Kong. We suggested that there should be a probation period or trial period during which, if the FDHs are daring the employers to sack them, then there shouldn't be any passages. And otherwise, they will try to get sacked and then look for a new employment. Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Thank you, President. We did discuss this issue. We examined the issue. Now, it would be very complicated to introduce a trial period. It may not be beneficial to the employer and the employee. Now, we have the standard employment contract whereby there would be 1 month notice on both sides for the contract to be terminated. There can be a notice in lieu of payment. And we do have a flexible mechanism to allow the employers to deal with the issues within a short time. Now, with a trial period, the employees can also take advantage of this, and that would incur losses on the part of the employers. And in any circumstances, the employers have to pay for the passages. So the costs incurred will not be any less. We did consider this is not as simple as it is made out to be. I think the most important thing is that we should promote better labor relations between the employer and the employee. Mr. Frankie Yik, the second part of my question has not been answered. In Singapore, now when the employer sacks the foreign domestic helper, she has to be taken to the airport, otherwise the employer will be held responsible. Would that be considered? Right, your question has been asked. Please be seated. Any secretary? Secretary for Security. President. Anybody who's in Hong Kong legally, we cannot compel them to leave Hong Kong. When a contract has been terminated under the contractual terms, the employer has to pay for the passages, and the employee will be given some time to stay in Hong Kong, during which he or she can leave Hong Kong. And this is in line with the legal requirements in Hong Kong. Mr. Frankie Yik mentioned a particular country a moment ago, whereby the employer has to escort the helper to the airport and see him or her off at the airport. We don't have these arrangements in Hong Kong. Starry Lee. Well, it must be clear that I have a domestic helper myself. I think we all feel the same with regard to FDHs. The employers are not sufficiently protected. There is no probation period, and for the intermediates, and if the helpers provide erroneous or fake information, it would be very difficult for us to take the cases to the authorities. I have received quite a lot of complaints that there are some helpers who seek to have the contract terminated in order to get the passages. For these cases, has the authority conducted any enforcement action, and how many success stories do we have? Secretary for Security. Thanks very much, Madam Lee, for the question. Under the existing arrangement, if both the employer and employee have terminated the contract, doesn't matter who initiated that, there is a duty to notify the immigration department in writing within 7 days. And under the condition of stay, the immigration department will act accordingly. When a contract has been terminated, the domestic helper has to within 14 days, or if if the stay period is less than 14 days, the helper has to leave Hong Kong within this period. And the Immigration Department will see to it that he or she will leave Hong Kong. If otherwise, it is a breach of the condition of stay, and the Immigration Department will take follow-up action appropriately. When the helper seeks to come back to Hong Kong to engage in employment, the Immigration Department, prior to giving the approval, will make sure that the domestic helper has left Hong Kong. And if she's still in Hong Kong, then there will be no visa approved, with certain exceptions. Like, for instance, there is migration, death, and financial difficulties, and therefore the employer cannot fulfill the contract, or if there has been abuse of the foreign domestic helper. Now, in these exceptional circumstances, the Immigration Department will allow the helper to look for alternative employer without having to leave Hong Kong physically. In dealing with these cases, the Immigration Department will exercise due diligence and look at all the records. Now, when the contractor has been terminated, the employer has to write to the Immigration Department about the reasons for termination of the contract. So when we approve or vet the future application, all these will be taken as reference. Ms. Starry Lee, the Secretary made the point on more than one occasion about the domestic helper having to leave Hong Kong. And my question is, there are some employees who didn't leave Hong Kong, and did you arrest them and get penalized? Well, this question wasn't part of your original question. Will you wait a turn again? Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, President, in his reply, the Secretary said that the administration will regularly review the immigration policies. Now, I'd like to put a question here. The Hong Kong Motor, the Motor Drivers Union, and many professional drivers asked me to put this to the administration as to whether they would check to find out whether foreign domestic helpers are working as drivers, thus threatening the livelihood of the local drivers. Have you taken any prosecution action over the past 3 years? Are you going to take a closer look at the situation, whether there are any foreign domestic helpers doubling as drivers, smashing the rice bowl of local drivers in Hong Kong? Secretary for Security, President, well, we did discuss this matter on more than one occasion before. Foreign domestic helpers engaging in driving duties, the policy is very clear. The Immigration Department does conduct regular checks, and upon receipt of complaints, the Immigration Department will take enforcement action. Any illegal acts will be dealt with in accordance with the information collected. If there is sufficient evidence, we will instigate prosecution action. Mr. Wong asked for the statistics. I'm afraid I haven't got them with me for the time being, and I'll see what data I can gather after this meeting. Mr. Kwok-hing, President, the intermediaries of foreign domestic helpers are collecting fees ranging from a few $1,000s to well over $10,000. The employers are clueless about all these fees and charges collected by the intermediaries. There are so many different fees, placement fees, medical checkup fees, and also retention fees and so on, all manner of fees. The intermediaries, after collecting the fees, tend not to do anything at all. And if the domestic helpers, they cannot be hired, there will not be any refund. Will the administration step up any regulation over the fees and charges collected by the intermediaries? And will you compel the intermediaries offer a list of these fees and charges in order to minimize any situation of abuses? Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, under the existing law, there are no provisions regarding the operation of the intermediaries. But we keep reminding the employers, as consumers, to exercise some due care. They have to patronize the intermediaries that are reputable, that they can inspire confidence. Ultimately, this is a commercial decision that the employers patronizing the intermediaries. It is simply a commercial decision. On July the 19th, as members are aware, there is this trade description, unfair trade practices or amendment ordinance, and that will be taken to the Council on July the 19th. And the intermediaries will also be regulated if they come up with any false description, if there are any glaring omissions, and if they are overcharging to the tune of a few $1,000s, for instance, the employer can take legal action. And they can refer the cases to the Customs and Excise. Once this is enacted on the 19th, there would be added protection for the employers in Hong Kong. Ms. Chen Yunhan. President, thank you. A moment ago, the Secretary told Mr. Wong that he would gather evidence about abuses, the statistics and so on. And Mr. Wong Kok-heng said before the reunification that the government meant to prohibit the foreign helpers from any driving duties, but they mentioned the consular staff who might need English-speaking drivers. Now, there are many doctors who are hiring overseas helpers to engage in driving duties. Your question, please, Ms. Chen. Now, my question is, what criteria do you have about the abusers? If they want a driver, a foreign driver, you will give the approval. Now, what criteria do you have? Please be seated. Your question has been put. Secretary for Security. President. Now, this question mentioned by Ms. Chen Yunhan, we did discuss this some years ago, and there were different views from the Council. Having considered a wide variety of views from members, we have put in place this particular system. As of today, I understand that some professional drivers feel that there is a need for improvement on the existing system. We're monitoring the implementation of the system. Now, there are different views from different quarters. So our policy represents a balance struck between the two sides. Now, this system has been around for so many years and has been serving us well. I think this should continue until exceptional circumstances arise. Dr. Helena Wong, President. In Hong Kong, it is difficult to hire foreign domestic helpers, and there is very much a shortage. And we're all grateful to these 300,000 or so foreign domestic helpers. They look after children, they look after elderly. I mean, we run short of these kind of services. In Part C of the reply, under the foreign domestic helper policy, this doesn't apply to the mainland Macau and Taiwan and various other countries. Now, what about the idea of introducing mainland helpers to Hong Kong? 5 years ago, the government did complete a study on the importation of labor. I understand that Macau has already introduced helpers from the mainland. Will the government reconsider this policy of disallowing mainland helpers to come to Hong Kong? If so, what are the details? If not, what consideration, security consideration, do you have in mind? Secretary for Security. President, from time to time, there are voices in the community urging the administration to change the existing policy to allow mainlanders to come to Hong Kong to engage in domestic work. It has always been the administration's attitude that, having listened to the views from various quarters, the idea of introducing mainlanders to Hong Kong to work as domestic helpers, it is liable to being abused. So this policy of not allowing mainlanders to come to Hong Kong to work as domestic helpers will not change. We spent 23 minutes on this question. That's it for the question time.
Bill, we now resume